Jamalyn woke up before sunrise on her first day at Riverside Middle School. The sky was still dark when she tiptoed into the kitchen. Her mother was already there, pouring cereal into 2 bowls. The warm light from the small lamp on the counter made the kitchen feel safe and kind. Jamalyn took a deep breath. She felt a flutter in her chest, excitement and nervousness. Today she would meet new friends, learn new things, and find her place in a school she had never visited before. Her mother smiled at her and said, "You look ready." Jamalyn offered a small smile in return. She did not tell her mother about the butterflies in her stomach. As always, she wanted to seem brave. After breakfast, she hugged her mother tightly. Her father was waiting outside, ready to drive her to school. Jamalyn stepped out onto the quiet street. The air was cool and smelled of fresh grass. The morning was still, and the hush of early dawn made everything feel peaceful. On the drive to school, her father pointed out neat rows of maple trees lining the road. He told her to look for the big red building with tall windows. Riverside Middle was near a small park where families often walked dogs. Jamalyn pressed her forehead against the cool car window and watched houses glide by. She wondered what her new classmates would be like. Would they ask where she came from? Would they laugh at her clothes? She shook her head softly, reminding herself that she could handle whatever happened. She was strong. When they arrived, the parking lot was full of cars and busy with activity. Kids in backpacks hurried toward the main entrance. Some laughed, greeting each other with waves and high fives. A few smaller children ran ahead, their voices bright and loud. Jamalyn stayed close to her father's side. He parked the car and reached back to open her door. "You'll do fine," he said. She gave him a quick nod and climbed out. Beat fast. She carried her backpack on one shoulder and stepped up to the front steps. A tall flagpole stood near the entrance, the American flag rippling gently in the morning breeze. The walls of the school were made of smooth brick, warm in color, as if they glowed under the sun. She felt a gentle buzz of excitement in her mind. New beginnings can feel scary, but they can also feel full of promise. She thought of all the stories she had read about brave girls, who started fresh in a new place and made friends in the most unlikely ways. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of cleaning spray and waxed floors. Lockers lined each side of the corridor, painted a soft blue. Ceiling lights hummed overhead. She looked down at her list of classes written neatly on a small piece of paper. First period was homeroom. She had to find room 1-B. She followed a few students who seemed to know where they were going. Every now and then, she heard a friendly, "Hey, look at the new girl," as she passed. She smiled politely, but kept her eyes on the names on the doors. At room 1-B, the door was open. A kind woman with gentle eyes stood inside. She wore a necklace with tiny stars, and her voice was soft when she said, "You must be Jamalyn. Welcome to Riverside Middle. Come on in." Some faces were curious, some friendly, others neutral. No one said anything aloud, but she felt their eyes. She tried not to let it bother her. She walked to the seat near the window, placing her bag on the floor. She took out her notebook and pencil, arranging them neatly on her desk. A boy next to her leaned over and whispered, "Hi, I'm Marcus. You look new." His voice was warm and welcoming. Jamalyn smiled and said, "Yes, I just moved here." Marcus nodded and offered a fist bump. She tapped his fist with hers and felt a tiny spark of relief. Maybe this could be okay. As homeroom went on, the teacher, Ms. Harper, called attendance. She asked each student to say their name and share one thing they liked. The room buzzed as students answered, basketball, drawing, video games. When it came to Jamalyn, she stood up, cleared her throat, and said, "I'm Jamalyn Lewis. I like karate and reading mystery books." A few students murmured, "Oh, karate." Cool. She sat down and felt a small rush of pride. Inside, karate was a big part of her life. She had trained for years, but she spoke of it simply, without bragging. The morning classes passed in a blur. In math, she solved problems carefully, raising her hand when she was unsure. Some students glanced at her work, nodding in approval. In science, she listened closely as Ms. Harper explained the water cycle. She asked questions and took notes with neat handwriting. At lunch, she carried her tray to an empty table in the corner. She thought about joining a group, but she hesitated. Instead, she sat alone, eating her sandwich slowly, looking around. At the other students, some chatted in small groups, few walked by and waved. Still, she felt a bit lonely. After lunch, she had English. The class read a short story about a girl who saved her town from a flood. As the story unfolded, Jamelin imagined herself in the girl's place, staying calm when everyone else panicked. She thought about how she had learned to stay calm in karate class, even when her instructor tested her with fast punches and hard kicks. That calm had helped her here today, in the car ride, the busy hallway, and the quiet lunchroom. Near the end of the day, she walked to her last class, social studies. The classroom door had a poster of famous leaders: Martin Luther King Jr., Susan B. Anthony, Nelson Mandela. Seeing their pictures made her think of standing up for what is right, even when it is hard. She found her seat and listened as Ms. Rivera began a lesson on the civil rights movement. Jamelin felt a quiet connection with the stories of people who used peaceful strength to create change. She pressed her hand against her notebook, certain that one day she would use her own strength to do good. Suddenly, a group of girls approached her desk. Their leader, a tall girl with dark hair, smiled in a way that did not reach her eyes. Jamelin's breath caught. The girl said, "You're the new girl, right? I'm Taryn. Mind if we borrow your pencil?" Jamelin handed over a pencil from her holder. Taryn and her friends whispered among themselves, laughing softly. One of them tapped Jamelin on the shoulder and said, "Nice outfit." They moved on, leaving Jamelin feeling a small sting in her heart.
Nice.
She wondered if she had done something wrong. When the final bell rang, the halls filled again with students. Jamelin followed the crowd to the lockers. She felt the weight of her day new classes, new faces, friendly moments, and that strange encounter at the end. She opened her locker, found a spot high enough to be out of the way. She placed her books inside. Turning away from the stream of students, she noticed Taryn and her friends standing by another locker, laughing in low voices. Their laughter echoed in the hallway and sent a chill through Jamelin. Still, she did not let them see her worry. She closed her locker and took a deep breath. She remembered her karate teacher's words. Strength is not only in your muscles. It is in your calm mind and gentle heart. She squared her shoulders and walked out of the locker row with her head held high. Outside, the late afternoon sun made gold patterns on the floor. She spotted her father waiting by the front steps. He waved and smiled. Her heartbeat slowed. As she climbed into the car for the ride home, her father asked, "How was your day?" Jamelin thought of Marcus, Ms. Harper, and the stories in English and social studies. She also thought of the pencil incident. She said it was good. "I made one friend. Some people were nice, a few were. Not sure yet." Her father nodded and said, "That is to be expected. Just be yourself." Jamelin smiled as the car pulled away. On the drive back, she stared at the trees rushing past. She felt tired, but proud. She had survived her first day at Riverside Middle. Tomorrow, she would face more classes, more tests, and, most likely, more challenges. But she had karate training. In her mind as well as in her arms, she knew that no matter what happened, friendly faces or cold ones, she could stay calm, think clearly, and act with kindness when it was right. And if anyone tried to push her too far, she would be ready to stand up for herself, quietly but firmly, just as her teachers in class taught her and her father reminded her. That night, after dinner, she lay in bed reading her favorite mystery book. She turned off the lamp and closed her eyes. She thought of the lessons of the day: welcoming smiles, kind words, gentle strength, and courage. Her last thought before sleep was a promise to herself to be brave, to be kind, and to never forget that true strength comes from a heart that cares. With that promise, she drifted into dreams of tomorrow's adventures at Riverside Middle School. ChatGPT said. The morning light slipped through the car window as Jamelin climbed out beside her father once more. She felt the same familiar flutter in her chest, but this time it mixed with a bit of resolve. She remembered how she had breathed deeply yesterday, how she had found calm, even when Taryn and her friends had whispered behind her back. Today, she told herself, would be better. Inside the school hallway, she spotted Marcus waiting by her locker. He waved and said, "Hey, Jamalin, want to walk together?" His smile felt warm. She nodded and followed him to her locker. As she opened it, she felt the cool metal handle in her palm and let a small breath out. Marcus chatted about his weekend soccer game. His easy way of talking made her feel normal again. In homeroom, Ms. Harper greeted her. "Good morning, Jamalin," she said, and Jamalin returned the greeting. The class settled, but she noticed Taryn and her group glance over. They exchanged looks and smiles that did not reach their eyes. Jamalin focused on her notebook instead, scribbling the day's schedule as Ms. Harper spoke. During math class, she answered a question about fractions, and the teacher praised her. A few classmates smiled and whispered, "Good job." Jamalin felt proud. She liked math because numbers never lied. They stayed constant, even when people's moods shifted. She tucked that thought away as she listened to Mr. Cho explain decimals. At lunch, Marcus and a few friends waved her to join their table. She set down her tray peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and water and slid into the bench. The conversation flowed easily. One boy, Sarah's twin brother Leo, told a joke that made everyone laugh. Jamalin joined in, feeling lighter. It was good, she thought, to have allies. But as they ate, she noticed Taryn's table across the room. They leaned forward, watching her and her new friends. Taryn tapped her chin and whispered to a girl beside her. The girl looked over at Jamalin and rolled her eyes. For a moment, Jamalin's heart tightened. She forced herself to return her gaze to Leo's story about a runaway hamster. She laughed and felt the tension ease. After lunch, she headed to science class. This time, Ms. Harper had assigned a group project about plants. Jamalin ended up in a group with Sarah and two other classmates. They gathered around a poster board and drew pictures of leaves and roots. During their discussion, she suggested they add a diagram of how water moves through a plant. Sarah nodded and said, "Great idea." The group worked smoothly, and Jamalin felt useful. In the hallway between classes, Taryn blocked her path. "Hey, new girl," she said softly. "You left this behind." Taryn held up a pink hair clip, a simple plastic clip with a tiny bow. Jamalin froze. She didn't remember dropping one. "Thanks," she said, reaching out. As she took it, Taryn's friends giggled. One of them said, "Better watch your stuff, karate girl." They stepped aside and let her pass. She squeezed her books closer to her chest and hurried away. She imagined herself in a karate stance for a moment, steady and calm. But she reminded herself that these were words, and her strength lived in kindness as well as skill. She told herself to stay calm and sweet, like Miss Harper had said. Kindness is a true sign of strength. In English class, they began a new story about kindness in tough times. The teacher read passages and asked students to reflect. Jamalin thought of her own challenge, standing steady when Taryn teased her. She wrote her thoughts in her journal. Kindness can soften hard hearts. She looked up and saw some classmates nodding at her answer. A small pride filled her heart. During social studies, the lesson was about the power of peaceful protest. They learned how people had changed the world without anger, using truth and calm. Jamalin felt a connection between those stories and her own situation. She imagined using calm words to teach Taryn and her friends to be kinder. She wondered if that could work. After class, she went to her locker to get her jacket. The hallway was quiet between classes, and she felt safe for a moment. Then she heard low laughter behind her. She turned and saw Taryn leaning against lockers with two girls. They looked pleased. Taryn said, "We have a surprise for you today, Jamalin." Jamalin's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Taryn pushed off the lockers and stepped toward her. "Just wait and see," she said. Three of them spun on their heels and walked away, leaving Jamalin confused and uneasy. She shuttered her locker and hurried to her next class, hoping it was nothing serious. The rest of the afternoon felt tense. She answered questions in class, but kept looking at the clock. When the final bell rang, she left the classroom fast. The hallway was crowded, and she wove through students, her bag bouncing at her waist. She reached her locker, but paused. The locker row was empty, except for Taryn and her friends standing in a line ahead. Between two pairs of lockers, they waited. Her pulse raced. She could turn and walk to another row, but something made her stop. She thought of her karate teacher's voice. Face your fears calmly. She took a deep breath and approached quietly. "Hi," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "What's up?" Her voice shook. Taryn looked surprised. "Oh, we just wanted to send you on your way," she said with a sly grin. Before Jamalin could respond, the girls each grabbed one of her arms and pushed her gently toward the space. Between lockers, the cold metal frame enclosed her on three sides. Taryn clicked the lock shut. Jamalin gasped. She touched the lock with her fingers. It was small and metal, clicking tight. Taryn laughed softly. "Enjoy your new home," she said, and she and her friends turned and walked off. Jamalin heard their fading laughter as the hall emptied. Her breath came fast. The space was tight and smelled of metal and old coats. She pressed her back against the locker wall, feeling a wave of fear. She gripped the lock and tried to twist. It did not budge. She hugged her knees and closed her eyes. She remembered the calming exercises from karate class. Breathe in through the nose. Hold, then breathe out through the mouth. She did it 3 times. Her heartbeat slowed. She stood up and looked around. The locker above her head made a small shelf. She climbed onto it, using her hands to brace herself. She reached for the lock and tried to pick at it with a hairpin. She remembered from her bag. It slipped from her fingers. She sat back down slowly, not wanting to panic. She thought of her mother's gentle smile and her father's encouraging words. She reminded herself she could be calm and smart. She ran her fingers along the locker hinges, noticing a small gap. Maybe she could force it open. She pressed her shoulder against the door and braced her feet. With a strong push, the door shivered but stayed shut. Minutes passed, then an hour. She heard footsteps in the distance, a cart rolling. The janitor was cleaning far down the hall. She yelled softly, "Excuse me?" Her voice echoed. No response. She tried again, louder this time. "Plo, please help." She felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them away. She did not want to give the bullies that satisfaction. She remembered a karate lesson about using pressure, not force. She placed her palm on the inside of the door and pressed gently up and to the side, the door creaked. She repeated the motion, focusing on calm pressure. Inch by inch, the lock began to loosen. Suddenly, the door swung open a crack. Light streamed in. She reached out, gripping the edge, and pulled herself free. She stood, brushing off her clothes. At that moment, Taryn and her friends returned, their laughter echoing. They stopped in surprise as they saw her step out. Jamalin felt her muscles tense, but she kept her face calm. She looked each girl in the eye, steady and unwavering. Taryn opened her mouth, but no words came. Jamalin took a small step forward and said in a firm voice, "Don't ever do that again." Taryn swallowed and backed away. The other girls huddled behind her, avoiding Jamalin's gaze. Jamalin turned and walked away, toward the office, head held high. She knew she had stood up for herself without raising her voice or hurting anyone. She felt a quiet glow inside. She had faced the bullies and won with calm courage. Jamalin's heart still raced when she reached the main office. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as she pushed open the glass door. The secretary looked up in surprise. "Jamalin, are you okay?" she asked, rising from her chair. Jamalin nodded, her voice steady but low. "I need to talk to the principal." She explained in short sentences what had just happened, how Taryn and her friends trapped her in a locker and how she managed to free herself. The secretary's eyes widened. She picked up the phone and dialed quickly. Within minutes, Mr. Caldwell, the principal, appeared at the office door. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle voice that always made students feel heard. He invited Jamalin into his private office. The walls were lined with photos of school events, science fairs, sports days, music recitals. Mr. Caldwell closed the door behind them and gestured to a chair. "Tell me everything," he said. Jamalin repeated the story, trying to keep her voice calm. She described the metal crunch of the locker door, the fear she felt in the tight space, and the way her karate training helped her stay clear-minded. Mr. Caldwell listened without interruption, nodding and taking notes. When she finished, he leaned back and sighed. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself," he said. "But I'm also sorry you had to go through that. We'll handle this." He picked up the phone again and called Taryn and her parents. Next, he summoned Taryn and her friends into his office, one by one. Jamalin sat quietly in the waiting area, her hands folded in her lap. She thought of her mother's words, "Stand tall, speak the truth." She felt a swell of relief that the adults would intervene. After about 20 minutes, the secretary led Jamalin back into the office. Mr. Caldwell looked serious but fair. "We spoke with everyone involved," he said. "Taryn and her friends will serve detention for bullying and will meet with the school counselor. They will also write apology letters to you." He slid a paper across the desk. "I'd like you to read this draft of the apology. Let me know if it feels right." Jamalin read the letter carefully. It was respectful and sincere. She felt a small lift in her chest. She nodded and told Mr. Caldwell it was fine. He smiled and said, "Good, we'll move forward with this tomorrow." He stood and offered his hand. "Thank you for your courage, Jamalin." She shook his hand and left the office with a light step. In the hallway outside, she found Marcus waiting. He gave her a thumbs up. "How did it go?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "They will apologize. They'll have to face consequences." Marcus nodded, relief on his face. "I'm proud of you," he said. She felt warmth spread through her. It was good to have a friend who saw her strength the next morning. As she entered the school, she saw Taryn and her friends lined up in detention. They turned at her approach, their eyes on the ground. One of them glanced up and mumbled something. That might have been an apology. Jamalin kept walking, telling herself to stay calm. She opened her locker and found a small note taped inside. "I'm sorry. T." She read it and tucked it into her pocket. She felt a mixture of relief and caution. In homeroom, the students buzzed with news of the bullying incident. Some praised Jamalin. Others whispered about what Taryn had done. A few classmates who had been on the sidelines finally spoke up. "I'm sorry I laughed," one girl said. Jamalin nodded and replied, "Thank you." She felt the weight of the day lighten. During art class, she painted a scene of a calm lake at sunset, her mind's image of peace. The water was smooth, reflecting soft pink clouds. As she worked, she thought about forgiveness and how it could help the lockers of her mind to open, just like she had with the metal door. She added a small figure practicing karate kicks by the water's edge, secret symbol of her own strength. At lunch, she again joined Marcus and his friends. They sat under the shade of an oak tree in the courtyard. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead. She pulled out Taryn's note and showed it to Marcus. He smiled. "That's a good start," he said. She folded the note and put it away. Decided not to mention the locker incident again. It was behind her now. But later that afternoon, as she walked to science class, she noticed Taryn standing by her locker alone. Taryn looked up and said softly, "Jamalin, can we talk?" Jamalin paused. She remembered her karate teacher's lesson. Use your strength to protect peace, not to start fights. She nodded and approached. Taryn's voice was quiet. "I'm really sorry about yesterday. I didn't think it would go that far. I was trying to scare you, but I see now it was wrong." Jamalin looked into her eyes. She saw guilt there, not malice. She said, "Thank you for saying that. It hurt me a lot, but I forgive you." Taryn looked surprised and relief-washed. Over her face, they stood in front of the lockers for a moment, the school bustling around them. Taryn added, "I want to be friends, if that's okay." Jamalin thought of the kindness she had learned. It takes courage to forgive and even more. To trust again? She smiled and said, "Okay." They shook hands. a small but meaningful gesture. The rest of the week passed smoothly. Taryn sometimes waved to Jamelin in passing instead of turning away. In art class, they sat closer together, chatting about favorite colors. In math, Taryn whispered questions, and Jamelin helped her solve the problems. Their friendship was tentative, but real. By Friday, Jamelin felt a new sense of belonging. She still practiced her karate in the mornings, but now she also practiced kindness in her days at school. She understood that real strength lay in staying calm under pressure, standing up for yourself, and offering forgiveness when someone showed real remorse. At home that Friday evening, she told her parents about the apology and the new friendship. They hugged her and praised her maturity. Jamelin felt proud not just for her karate skills, but for her calm heart. She realized that sometimes the hardest battles are inside us, and peace is the greatest victory of all. ChatGPT said. The sun sank low in the sky, painting the hallway in long golden stripes. Jamelin stayed after school to finish a piece of art for her next class. She sat on a small stool in the art room, brush in hand, adding soft green leaves to her painting of a quiet forest. The room was empty except for the distant hum of lockers in the corridor. She heard faint footsteps and wondered if it might be Ms. Rivera checking on her progress. Instead, she saw Taryn and the same two friends slip through the doorway there, laughter hushed and tense. Jamelin set her brush down carefully and turned to face them, her heart fluttering. She had forgiven Taryn, but she still felt wary. Taryn's eyes met hers, and for a split second, Jamelin saw something like regret. There. Then Taryn pushed a strand of hair back and said, Hey, are you alone? Jamelin rose slowly and replied, Yes. What do you need? She kept her tone calm, remembering how important it was to speak softly, even when inside she felt both curious and nervous. One of Taryn's friends dropped a set of charcoal pencils onto the table, the sharp click echoing in the room. The pencils rolled across the wooden top, and Jamelin watched them slide away. She stepped forward and gathered them up, handing each pencil back with a polite, Here you go. Taryn raised an eyebrow and said thanks. For a moment no one spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the moment before a rainstorm. Jamelin wondered what was coming next. Suddenly Taryn's shoulders squared and she stepped nearer. Her voice was low. We heard you told the principal about us. Jamelin's chest tightened. She met Taryn's gaze and said, I told the truth about what happened. I had to. Taryn's eyes darkened for a moment, and then she looked away. The other girls shifted their weight from foot to foot. Jamelin felt the room grow smaller, her calm focus challenged by their tense posture. Taryn's voice softened, almost a whisper. I'm sorry about the locker, but it got out of hand. Jamelin nodded, remembering how quickly that day had turned frightening. She said, I forgive you for that. I just want us all to get along. Taryn exhaled and ran her hand through her hair. I know, she said. I really didn't mean to scare you so much. The other girls exchanged glances, and one muttered, Yeah, we're sorry too. Their words seemed genuine this time, not forced. As they spoke, Jamelin shifted her stance slightly, feet planted shoulder-width apart, recalling her karate forms. She felt steady and grounded. She offered Taryn a small, encouraging smile. Thank you for saying that, she said. Let's not let this happen again. Natan nodded, and the tension in her shoulders seemed to melt. The other two girls looked relieved, their earlier bravado slipping away. The room felt lighter. Taryn reached into her pocket and pulled out a small sketchbook. I made this, she said, handing it to Jamelin. I drew some ideas for the art project. I thought you might like to use them. Jamelin opened the sketchbook and saw neat pencil drawings of trees, birds, and a scene of children playing. Her eyes widened. These are beautiful, she said softly. Thank you. Tears of gratitude pricked at her eyes. She realized this was more than an apology. It was a gesture of friendship. Just then, footsteps sounded at the door. Ms. Rivera peeked in, surprise on her face. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, she said gently. I just came to check. If you needed any brushes, Jamelin held up a smile. We're doing fine, Ms. Rivera. Taryn added. Thanks for asking. The teacher nodded and left, closing the door softly behind her. When the hallway fell quiet again, the three girls stood together, looking at the sketchbook as though it were a precious treasure. Taryn cleared her throat. So, do you want to work on the project together? She asked. Jamalyn felt warmth spread through her chest. She stood a little taller and said, I'd like that. The two other girls smiled shyly and one said, Yeah, we can help too. They moved to the table, arranging paints and brushes in a neat row. Together, they began to mix colors and plan the layout of their poster, voices soft but enthusiastic. As they worked side by side, Jamalyn noticed how each girl brought a different strength. One had a steady hand for coloring small details. The other had a good eye for balancing shapes and space. Terrence sketched bold lines with confidence, and Jamalyn added gentle shading and blended colors until everything looked smooth. They talked about their favorite animals and summer plans. Laughter bubbled up, light and free. Time seemed to stretch and bend until the final bell rang. The girls gathered their supplies and prepared to leave. Taryn turned to Jamalyn. Thanks for forgiving me, she said sincerely. And said, We're friends now. They shook hands once more, this time with genuine warmth. As they walked out of the art room together, the corridor felt different, brighter, kinder, full of possibility. That evening, Jamalyn sat at her desk at home and carefully placed the sketchbook from Taryn on her shelf. She thought about how fear and anger had given way to understanding and cooperation, remembered the calm form of a karate stance, the promise to use strength only to protect peace, and how that promise guided her through the day. She realized that standing up for herself did not end in conflict, but opened the door to a new friendship. Before bed, she practiced her kata in the quiet of her room. Each movement was slow and deliberate, a dance of power and grace. As she completed the final bow, she felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that tomorrow and every day after, she would face new challenges. But she also knew that with kindness, courage, and calm, she could turn even the hardest moments into chances for growth and connection. And with that thought, she drifted into a well-earned sleep, ready for whatever the next day would bring. The next morning, Jamalyn woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink. She stretched her arms, feeling calm and refreshed. As she got ready for school, she looked at her reflection in the mirror and gave herself a small smile. Something had changed inside her, not just because she had made peace with Taryn, but because she had grown. She had faced fear, stayed calm, and stayed true to herself. That was something to be proud of. Downstairs, her mother was packing lunch while humming an old song. You're glowing today, she said as Jamalyn walked into the kitchen. Something good happen? Jamalyn nodded. I think I made new friends, she replied. Her mother raised an eyebrow with a warm smile. You're strong and kind, baby. People notice that. Jamalyn hugged her mom before heading out the door. At school, the atmosphere felt different, softer, more welcoming. Students who hadn't spoken to her before began saying hello. Some nodded in the hallway, others gave her small waves. Marcus caught up to her near her locker. I heard you're working on the art project with Taryn, he said, clearly surprised. Wow, Jamalyn nodded. We talked. We're not best friends, but we understand each other now. He grinned. That's what real strength looks like, Jamalyn. You didn't just protect yourself, you helped fix something bigger. She felt her chest grow warm. Coming from Marcus, those words meant a lot. In homeroom, Ms. Harper gave the class an assignment to write about a time they showed courage. Jamalyn's pencil hovered over the paper. So many moments came to mind. But instead of writing about the locker or the confrontation, she wrote about the decision to forgive. She described how hard it was to choose peace when anger would have been easier. As she wrote, the classroom faded around her. Her heart poured. Into the paper, one word at a time. Later that day, the art project came to life. In the art room, Jamalyn, Taryn, and the others laid out the final pieces on a large poster board. The scene showed a forest where animals of all kinds lived together. There were squirrels playing, deer resting, birds singing. At the center stood a tall tree, and under it a girl in a karate pose. That detail had been Taryn's idea. "It represents you," she said. "Calm but strong." Jamelin smiled. "Could represent anyone who chooses peace over anger." They all nodded. The art teacher stopped by and gasped. "This is beautiful!" "It tells a story without a single word." She clapped her hands gently. "You four work together so well. This will go on the front wall during the open house." As the girls cleaned up, Jamalin noticed a small crowd outside the classroom. Students from other grades peeked in, curious about the artwork. Some entered to get a closer look. One boy said, "I want to draw like that someday." Another whispered, "That tree girl looks brave." Jamalin felt her heart swell. She had never imagined that their project would touch so many people. At lunch, she sat with both Marcus and Taryn's group. The two tables had pushed together, forming one long table of laughter and shared food. They talked about favorite movies, funny teachers, and dreams for the future. It felt natural, easy, as if they had always been a group, even though only days ago they had been strangers or, even worse, opposites. After lunch, a school announcement crackled through the intercom. "Attention, students, the principals," voice said. "Tomorrow we will be holding a student showcase. Anyone who would like to share a story of kindness, courage, or personal growth is welcome to speak in front of the class or submit a drawing or writing piece." The room buzzed. With chatter, Jamelin looked at her friends. Taryn turned to her and whispered, "You should speak." Jamelin's stomach flipped. "Me? I don't know," Marcus said. "You have to. People need to hear your story." Even the shy girl beside them added, "You're really good with words. Where hadn't you lived it?" That night, Jamelin sat at her desk, staring at the blank page in her notebook. She could feel her hands tremble. She wasn't scared of speaking. Not exactly. She was afraid of being too honest. What if people laughed? What if they misunderstood her? Then she remembered what her father once told her. If your voice can help even one person feel brave, it's worth speaking. So she began to write. She started with the first day, arriving in a new school, feeling like an outsider. She wrote about the fear of being locked in the locker. She described the silence, the darkness, and how she found strength inside herself through her breathing, her memories of karate, and her calm thinking. But most importantly, she wrote about what happened after the conversations, the apologies, and the slow path toward understanding. She ended her speech with a line she believed with all her heart: "Kindness isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can choose." The next day, the student showcase began. The gym was filled with students and teachers sitting on folding chairs. Posters and drawings decorated the walls. Jamelin sat in the front row, holding her paper tightly. When her name was called, she stood up slowly and walked to the microphone. The gym fell silent. She looked out at the crowd, at Marcus, at her art teacher, at Taranon, took a deep breath, then she began. Her voice was soft but clear. Every word came from her heart. As she told her story, the room remained still, listening closely. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then the entire room erupted in applause. After the event, students she didn't even know came up to her. Some said they had felt scared before too. Others said her story gave them hope. A few thanked her for reminding them that being kind didn't mean being weak. Even teachers stopped her in the hallways to say they were proud. Taryn came over, eyes bright. "You were amazing up there," she said. "Really, I couldn't have done that." Jamelin smiled and replied, "Maybe not yet. Right. But one day you might." They shared a laugh and walked to their next class together. From that day on, Jamalin became more than just the new girl. She became known as someone who stood strong without raising her voice, someone who changed things without fighting. And that became her legacy, not just in karate, not just in the art room, but in the hearts of those around her. Weeks passed, and the story of her courage stayed with the school. Teachers began giving more talks about kindness, students noticed. When someone was left out and invited them in, it wasn't perfect, but something had shifted. Seed had been planted. One afternoon, Jamalyn stayed late to help clean up the art room. The teacher handed her a small box. Inside was a medal, student of courage, for strength, peace. In leadership, Jamalyn looked at it, surprised. "This is for me?" she asked. The teacher nodded. "You didn't just protect yourself. You inspired others." Jamalyn held the medal in her hand. It felt light, but full of meaning. She smiled, not because of the medal, but because of the journey that had led to it. That night, she placed the medal beside her black belt on her, shelved to symbols of two kinds of strength, one emotional and both, she now knew, were equally powerful. As she drifted off to sleep, Jamalyn didn't think of lockers or speeches. She thought of the tree from their art project, all calm, peaceful, and just like that tree, she knew she would keep growing no matter what.